Now, there's no PowerPoint tonight. I made the blanks so that you could just read along with me and fill in as we go. There's one or two that I'll need to spell it to you. You probably don't need help, but nevertheless, it's just a name. But I will say there's a couple of things happening this week besides tonight with the kids and the teens outside and such. But Friday, obviously, there's a ladies' function, a fellowship dinner here at Friday night at 6. And then Saturday, we've got two things going on. Saturday's a youth rally. The teens will be gone all day. Please pray for that. They're going to be going down to Quincy. They'll be leaving about 8 a.m. And then there's a prayer breakfast here at 9 if you'd like to join us there. And then Sunday after church in the afternoon, a snack and a teen activity. So several things along those lines. But let me say a couple of things before we get into this. I have never done so much reading about abortion than I have in the last week. I tell you what, I have read one thing after the other, and it is amazing. And let me just caution you, and I'm sure you know this already, but depending on what the source is will determine what information is given on that website. So for instance, if you go to Planned Parenthood, you'll see some statistics there, and they give their version of history and facts. Much like election time coming up, you'll see all sorts of campaigns and ads and commercials and things, and they tell some of the story, but not all of it. It's just enough to taint the other guy, you know. And so depending on the source that I was reading, I had to keep in mind where it was coming from. And the stats that I'm sharing tonight have been verified. But anyway, it's just you have to be cautious about anything you look online of what they're trying to get accomplished by their information. And let me just say this as well, as we deal with this topic about abortion, in no way do I ever want to come across to try to condemn a person who has had an abortion. By no means. My emphasis here tonight is what God has tried to place in His Word, emphasis on life, the value of life. And but praise the Lord that God can take things of our life and still use them. And I hope that through this Wednesday night series, I'm just taking some current events and looking at the biblical perspective through it. So hopefully we can have the right perspective on things. But tonight's lesson is on the distortion of abortion. Let me give you some statistics before we actually start filling in the blanks. I looked up from a couple of different sources about the number of abortions given each year, and sadly, there's a couple of them actually have a meter that's counting the number of abortions. And I watched it for a few seconds, and it was just sad to think of another life, another life. Over the weekend in just Chicago, there were several murders going on for Mother's Day weekend, and I started thinking about that as I was watching this meter count the number of abortions, because whether it's somebody taking gunfire or somebody going to a clinic, it's still murder. And but the world doesn't see that. In fact, the polls are saying, and again, I realize it's a poll, so take that with a grain of salt, but the majority of Americans are in favor of abortion, or should I say, a woman's rights. But according to the World Health Organization, or WHO, there are 40 to 50 million abortions every year worldwide. And according to 2019 statistic from, I think it's the CDC, but I don't remember that. I don't have it marked down in my notes. But there are, in the United States, in 2019, 630,000 abortions in 2019. They did not have 2020 or 2021. I don't know why. But nevertheless, over 500,000 just in the United States of abortions performed. And I think that's very sad. I was sent a few days ago a news article about the Satanic Temple joining the Democrats in their battle for abortion rights, hoping to allow women to perform religious abortions. And I know I will be judged for the comment I'm getting ready to state here, but it just says something that the Satanic Temple is lined up with the Democrats. I mean, it just says something. I'm not trying to be political. It's just interesting on that particular issue. Many of the amendments, I started looking this week at also the Constitution and the amendments that are there, and many of them, including the two that are huge in the news right now, the 9th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, but others as well, they have the word person in the amendment. And if an unborn child is classified as a person, then those rights that those amendments protect belong to the fetus. And so they have been for years defining what the fetus is. It's not a life. It's not yet a human being, a child, if you will. And because those rights are for those out of the womb, or at least on further pregnancy. Even though there are laws being proposed, as well as some laws that have been passed for later term abortions, which are sad. I think it's a paradox. There are some states, this bothers me. There are some states who have stricter laws on tattoos and body piercings for minors. They have to get their parents' permission for those, but a teenager in that same state can go get an abortion without their parents' permission. And it's just a weird society. And I think they ought to have permission from the parents anyway, no matter what, but it's just weird that they allow for the abortions and not the others. Today on Fox News, there was an article. The headline read, and I quote, it's going to seem like I'm being political, but I'm just reading the article. Democratic-backed bill would force Christian doctors to perform abortions against religious beliefs, advocates warn. And of course, this has gone on for years as far as trying to make the clergy perform same-sex marriages, and now they're trying to disregard religious beliefs. We saw this in the last couple of years with masking, but disregard religious beliefs as it comes to being a physician now. And so they're trying to minimize what this book says, what God's opinion or thoughts are on morality. That's what they're really trying to do. So let's go with your notes. Some history of abortions in the United States, and this is the abridged version, or the condensed version, I should say. I read many things, and in no way am I trying to leave out history, but to include everything about the history of how abortion has impacted or influenced just the United States would be many pages long. And so I just gave some highlights, okay? So in no way am I trying to stress these are the most important, but I think they clearly tell how a woman's rights supersede a child's rights. And you'll see the emphasis growing that way as time progresses here in our timeline. So let's first of all look at the colonial days. In the early colonies, they used a variety of methods of abortion, including cedar root and black root as agents. Each colony was different and typically reflected the European country of its constituents. So, for instance, if people from a certain country came over and established a colony, primarily of that country of Europe, then whatever that European country believed on the issue would be that colony's issue. So that's what this opening paragraph is going to stress. And fill this first blank in. In the British colonies, abortions were legal if they were done before what they termed as quickening, the point at which a woman could first feel movements of the fetus, typically around the 4th month of pregnancy. In the French colonies, however, abortions were done despite the fact that they were considered illegal. Then you have two blanks here. In the Spanish and Portuguese colonies, it was illegal. From the 1700s to the 1800s, abortion was viewed as socially unacceptable. However, they were not illegal in most states. Whatever laws were there were ambiguous and difficult to enforce. After 1860, stronger anti-abortion laws were passed, so women utilized illegal underground abortion services. And then I put a little side note there that slaves were typically had to follow whatever their master wanted. And since most slave owners wanted the slaves to have more children, they certainly would not be in favor of having abortions because they wanted more property of theirs to help them on their fields. I found that sad, but I found an interesting part of history. In 1847, the American Medical Association, AMA, was formed. By 1880, all states restricted abortions. Some had exceptions if a mother's health was at risk. By 1910, it was illegal at every stage in pregnancy. Again, exceptions granted if the mother's health was at risk. Part of the reason was because America had several decades of increased immigration. White men in America who were worried about losing their hold wanted to get upper-class white women to have more children. So some of the pressure legally came because of an ethnic or racial issue. Again, not trying to draw race into it, but it is part of history. In 1873, the Comstock Act was passed. By the way, if you ever are interested in reading about the Comstock or any of these things, the Comstock Act is probably one of the most interesting things to me because the guy who passed it, Comstock, had in mind a moral society, and this act covered a lot of different areas. So I'm only telling you one aspect of it, but it's an interesting part of history. But it prohibited the USPS, or the United States Postal Service, to distribute information about abortion, contraceptives, and abortion meds. And since then, it's been amended a couple of different times to allow certain things to be shipped for various reasons. In 1955, because of so many unsafe, illegal abortions, a conference was held to discuss the legalization of abortion. In the 1950s and 1960s, many women took a drug named thalidomide, if I pronounce that correctly, to ease pregnancy symptoms. It was found to cause birth defects, which fueled the desire for more abortions. So here you have in the 50s reasons, and now because they've already made some exceptions, now with these possible defects, they're going to expand and allow more exceptions. You'll see this as the years progress, making more exceptions. In 1966, 9 doctors were sued in California, and that's an interesting couple of articles to read if you wanted to. It's called The Trial of the San Francisco Nine. Those 9 doctors performed abortions on women who were exposed to rubella, R-U-B-E-L-L-A, a disease known to cause birth defects. There was such a nationwide support for these doctors that California amended its prohibition to allow hospital committees to approve abortions under certain situations. Between the years of 1967 and 1973, states enacted reforms to allow abortions for the physical or mental health of a patient, for fetal abnormalities, and when the pregnancy resulted from rape or incest. That's the blank you want to fill in there. I want you to see how it was viewed in one way back in the early, but now as the years are progressing, well, under this situation, under that situation, well, let's extend it over here a little bit. Well, and the line is being moved. I just want you to see that. I'm not trying to be insensitive to terrible events that happen. I'm not. I just want you to see that as far as morality is concerned. In 1970, a few states started legalizing abortions. Anybody want to take a guess at what what state was the first one to legalize abortion? What was it? No? I knew you guys would say that. You guys think that California is a bunch. Hawaii was the first one. New York was right up there next to them, but some of the states that started legalizing abortion restricted it to its residents. New York, however, and some others, decided not to restrict it to residency. So they allowed it to anybody can come into the state of New York and get an abortion, which, by the way, if this issue does take place and everything is turned over, then it goes back to state rights. And we'll see people crossing state lines to get things done, or abortions. Of course, many will be coming to Illinois from Iowa, I'm sure. But anyway, New York, after the first couple of years, I don't have this statistic written, I think after the first 4 years of legalizing abortion, 2/3 of their abortions were out-of-staters. I think I'm correct on that. But it was interesting. In 1973, here's the big thing that happened in Roe versus Wade, because I led you to the chronology to see something, how it's leading up to legalizing. By the way, what's happened in our state and other states about legalizing marijuana and legalizing abortion, legalizing all these other things that used to be wrong, is because, the masses of people, they love it, or they're in favor of it, so let's legalize it. Since we can't stop them or penalize it, it's the mentality is, since people are doing it, let's allow it. And just because people do something doesn't make it right. And so here's what happened back in 1973. The Supreme Court ruled on Roe versus Wade, a decision that legalized abortion within the first trimester of pregnancy. In 1969, attempting an abortion was illegal in Texas, which is where all this stemmed from. Norma McCorvey was single and pregnant. Thinking that it was legal in cases of rape and incest, she tried to get an abortion by falsely claiming she was raped. Because there was no police report to prove it, she sought legal counsel, 2 attorneys, and I list them there, took Norma's case and dubbed their plaintiff Jane Roe. So Jane is her first name, which is a generic name, and Roe, R-O-E, to protect her identity. Henry Wade was the defending district attorney, DA. So that's how the name Roe versus Wade, because Roe is the plaintiff under disguise of a real name, Norma, and Wade is the DA. And just for a history background, earlier in 1964, Wade was the guy who prosecuted Jack Ruby, the guy who killed Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin of JFK. And so that's the connection there. The Supreme Court ruling didn't come in time for Norma to have an abortion, so she delivered her child and gave the baby up for adoption. That was what happened in 1973. In 1976, the Hyde Amendment, H-Y-D-E, barred Medicaid paying for abortions. So this representative, U.S. representative by the name of Hyde, said, why should everybody, taxpayers, pay for people having abortions? Why should Medicaid do that? So he passed, or got this bill passed called the Hyde Amendment. And by the way, at that time, 3/4 of all abortions were low income. I'm just stating that as a matter of fact. I'm not saying anything else there. But he made a statement of saying the government shouldn't pay for your decisions. Well, I want to say something about the southern border right now, but anyway. 1984, President Reagan instituted what is called the Global Gag Rule. And again, if you want to read something interesting, that's interesting. Which prevents foreign organizations that receive U.S. health aid to provide information on and referrals for abortions. Every president since then who either opposes or supports abortions has rescinded or reinstated that. So President Reagan started it and basically said, look, I know you can go down to Mexico and get an abortion and all this stuff and get treatment and advice and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so they made this agreement. But every president since then, depending on who's in the office, depending on what they believe or what party they're from, will either keep it or take it away. 1995, Norma McCorvey, a.k.a. Jane Roe, on August the 8th of that year was baptized as an evangelical Christian. Later, she was converted to Catholicism. But after those changes, spiritual changes in her life, she declared she was pro-life and regretted her role in the whole issue. And by the way, she admitted to being used as a puppet for someone else's cause. That's an interesting read if you want to do some further research. But anyway, 2003, after passed by Congress, President Bush signed into law a federal ban on all abortion procedures, but that was quickly and legally struck down in the courts. Currently, President Biden established what is called the Gender Policy Council, the GPC, to advance gender equity and equality. That's the group, by the way, that if you've seen in the last couple of years a lot of terms in the news and businesses and laws being passed about equity and equality, that's the group responsible, primarily. And has instructed them, so every word I'm getting ready to read, I took straight from the White House website, to prepare options for a response to the continued attack on abortion and reproductive rights under a variety of possible outcomes in the cases pending before the Supreme Court. We will be ready when any ruling is issued. So they're getting their guns intact and ready to fire away, legally speaking, to try to, depending on which way this thing goes, to try to keep abortion, to try to support women and their right to choose, rather than the right to life for that fetus. So I gave you a historical bird's eye view of what has transpired. Let's see what the Bible says tonight about life. So number one, life begins at conception. And again, we do not have time to read or look at all the references. You see probably 30 or 40 references that I've listed in this study here. The only difference between a fetus and one of us is age, location, and level of dependence. My grandson, who's 3 months old, would die if no one fed him, if no one cared for him. He is totally dependent on someone. I'm not dependent on my wife most of the time. I mean, sometimes, But my girls make fun of me because she cuts up the leftovers for my lunch the next day. Dad, you're not a child. I know. But anyway, but that little child inside the womb is located in there. But we're not. We're outside the womb. So the age is different, and some of you have been out of the womb a lot longer than I have, but nevertheless, the age is different, and of course, the dependence is different. But size and location doesn't determine humanity. When my grandson was in the womb, it wasn't still a fetus, as though it only became a child once it came out of the womb. I'll prove that to you biblically. Life begins at conception. And by the way, if you want to read those passages that I included there some other time, you can. But Samson said this, I have been a Nazirite from my mother's womb. David said, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. We're in the book of Jeremiah. Look at chapter 1, verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Nowhere in there does it use the word or even make an insinuation that it's only referring to a fetus. It's talking about a child, a person. Go to Isaiah, just back a few pages, chapter 44. Isaiah 44. Look at verse 2. Thus saith the Lord that made thee and formed thee from the womb. Look at verse 24. Thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. And there's other verses I can easily read there, but clearly you can see that life was there before the child came out of the womb. Children, I made this point as well, children in the womb are persons. By the way, Amos, I don't even have this reference down, but Amos chapter 1 says, Amos is preaching and he talks to pregnant women. And he uses this term, women with child. It doesn't say women with fetus, women with child. In other words, that growing life is life. It's a person. And I included other verses in there that child in the womb has personality. Even in the New Testament, the baby leaped with joy. Babies can have emotion in the womb. And so they are people. Number 2, let's go to Exodus. Exodus chapter 21. Last Bible reference we'll look at tonight. Exodus 21. The rest of the blanks will go really easy. Or quickly, I should say. Now, keep in mind, in Exodus 20 were the 10 commandments. One of the commandments, the 6th one, was thou shalt not kill. So in the very next chapter, he says, okay, let me be a little bit clearer on this. If a woman is pregnant and 2 guys are fighting and they accidentally, in their scuffle, hurt the woman so that she has a miscarriage, the guys are at fault. And they should be penalized because that child is life. Look at chapter 21, verse 22. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, she's had a miscarriage, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. Now, strangely, some people actually use that verse to say, see, it's not taking a life. Because if it was a true life, murder, the death penalty was for murder. But here, when a woman is pregnant, they only have to pay a fee. The difference between the murder that it's talking about is premeditated. This one was accidental. Abortions are premeditated murder. This is an accidental penalty. Abortions aren't accidental. So that can't be used as an excuse for somebody trying to explain away. So number 2, the death penalty was given to those who caused the death of a baby in the womb. Number 3, when an abortion is committed, murder is committed. And what I'm about to say is a very unpopular view, but it is a biblical view. Even in cases of rape, adultery, or incest. I know it may seem unkind, but in every case in the Bible, when there was an adulterous relationship, when there was incest, or when there was rape, they let the child live. Why? Because God places value on life. And it's a sad situation. Incest, rape, even the adultery thing. But nevertheless, that's the Bible stance. Number 4, we cannot do with our bodies as we like. This whole thing is about rights. A woman's right. Well, how about the child's rights? Just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. Or I don't know how I said that wrong, but just because I want to do something and the crave to it doesn't mean I should. There's laws in the land. There's laws of civility. There's speeding laws. Just because I want to do something doesn't mean so just because a woman wants to get an abortion doesn't mean she should. You know, this whole mess has been going around for years. It's my right, my right. I hope people would understand. I kind of wish, this may sound real cruel, that God would open up hell just for a few seconds to everyone who believes that. Not that they would be there, but they would see that's what you deserve. You want you right, what you deserve, that's what you deserve. That's what all of us deserve. You know, it just bothers me. That's my right. Man, if you got what you deserved, man. Anyway, number 5, God's plan was for man to procreate and to instruct his children about God. And there are many verses, including several New Testament verses. I realized I even forgot. I only copied down some of the Old Testament ones. But definitely God has a viewpoint of, hey, procreate. And then once the children are born, to teach them about God. And you can't do that if they're killed. Number 6, large-scale killings of infants were done by wicked men. In the Old Testament, it was Pharaoh. In the New Testament, it was Herod. When they put out a decree, kill the babies, kill the babies. Both were ungodly, heathen, wicked men. And in every biblical example, number 7, lastly, only the wicked destroyed their children. The heathen, godless, wicked people. Proverbs 6 says, these 6 things that the Lord hate, yea, 7 are abomination to him. And notice the third one that's listed, hands that shed innocent blood. God hates it. Father, thank you for life. Thank you that we get a chance to live. Not just in this life, but in the life to come. And we value babies. We value every conception, every family, Lord. Help us, Lord, to not to be sucked into the ideology and the thinking of the world and all the rare cases of things that are sad that people want to get an abortion for. Majority of it's because people don't have willpower, they're undisciplined, and they get pregnant, and it would mess up their life. That's why they get abortions. And they're more concerned about them than the future. And God, I pray that you'd help us, oh God, as a country, Lord, to value life once again, to value what you say, to respect you. Lord, please give us revival in this country, oh God. And thank you so much, oh God, that we get a chance to to reach out to life, to reach out to people. Help us to have a vision for the world and a heart for the community. And Lord, thank you so much that you can use even those of us, all of us really have made mistakes, but even those that have made decisions about life and how we've treated others or what have you. Thank you that there is forgiveness and restoration for that. And I pray that you'd help us, oh God, to look at things, even with the current events and the sad things that are going on, with joy and happiness that we know the truth, that we've been given the truth, and help us to share the truth. In Christ's name, amen. Have a great night.